Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Republican Representative Paul Tittle of Manitowoc is seeking re-election in the 25th Assembly District. Paul, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Good morning, Steve.
My question for incumbents is, if you're re-elected, top priority in the next session?
Well, my top priority is still going to be mental health. I think mental health is something that we need more of. We need more access to mental health. We need more providers for mental health. It started a few years ago when I first got on the Speaker's Task Force for Mental Health, which was a temporary task force. And then after that, I got reelected in 2014, and Robin Voss asked me, he said, well, Paul, what committees would you like to be on? And I said, well, I told him a few of the different committees, and I said, but I got to be honest with you, Robin, I don't think our work on mental health is done. And a day or two later, he called me up and said, Paul, would you be willing to chair the mental health committee? I'm going to start a new one. And I go, you do know that I'm not a counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, or anything. He says, no, but you have a passion for it. And he said, and that passion has been true because of personal family members and just stuff around in my community that I've witnessed. And I think the access for mental health is in great need yet.
Do we deal with that through better funding through Department of Public Instruction programs or the criminal justice system? What are the delivery mechanisms for mental health programming?
Well, there's several different delivery methods that need to. I think we definitely need to do more mental health counseling within our institutions, within our corrections institutions, because some of the programming and some of the exit programming, as you will, for a prisoner leaving prison does not start until about 6 months in. And there's we need to learn more about things like trauma-informed care and ACEs testing, so that we can. There are people, the reason that they're in prison, and it's not just because they're bad people. Something happened to them. When we have to find out what happened to them and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, you mentioned the criminal justice system. A big issue in the next session is going to be whether we need a new state prison. We have two that were built in the 1800s. Some Democrats argue that we could cut our prison population in half. Do we need a new state prison?
Well, if the cost to bring it into compliance for safety or safety of the guards, safety of the prisoners, outweighs the cost of building a new prison, there's a possibility we could build a new prison, but it's a matter of, you have to look at all aspects. You can't just look at, okay, how many people will we be incarcerating in the future? How many people will we need to incarcerate versus want to incarcerate, because there is a difference. And I think we'll have to it's going to have to be very in-depth. I would actually prefer an in-depth study committee on our prison population and the needs of the prison population, and I'll be advocating for that, including mental health.
Let's stay on healthcare.
Yeah.
Best way to protect and maybe expand rural healthcare, Paul? Well,
I think basically we have to have some type of incentives, I think, and my incentives that I was talking about for mental health include, tax credits for practicing in underserved areas, maybe helping a loan forgiveness program in underserved areas. I think because rural health, and even now when I go see a doctor, I'm not actually seeing a doctor. I'm usually seeing a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner until it gets a little bit to a different level. And I think when we do this, we ought to consider what we're going to be doing with that as well, not just giving doctors any type of credits, but possibly nurse practitioners to serve in underserved areas.
Have you heard from hospitals and medical providers about low Medicaid reimbursement rates?
Oh, yes.
My question is, are we at a tipping point with that in terms of low rates really threatening the quality of care through our MA system?
Well, I think the low rates should have to be looked at. We have to be looked at. I think the federal government needs to look at it as well. And I think that's not just a state problem, it's a federal problem as well. We also have the DISH program, which gives some money to underserved areas in the rural areas. There's several hospitals in my district that actually get it, or I think at least one hospital in my district that gets the DISH payment, and that helps them, but it doesn't complete the task, and it doesn't. They're losing money on every single one, and then you and I that have insurance, we're paying higher premiums because we end up supplementing that. So I think there's a give and take, and we need to look at that, and I think the federal government needs to look at that as well.
Have you followed the pilot program between state government and Delta Dental that provides dental care to low income through these regional clinics? If you followed it, should that be a priority in our next MA budget?
I think dental care, because of the stuff that we know about dental care right now, that it is very important for even further other health care, heart disease, and a lot more other stuff that, and then they end up going into emergency rooms, and their emergency rooms have no way of dealing with emergency dental care, but people are in a lot of pain, they're in a lot of suffering. I've gone down and witnessed the Mission of Mercy the past couple times that they've had it, and that's where dentists get together from all over the state and provide free dental care, and I think that should be applauded, and Delta Dental is a big proponent of that as well, and I think we should be looking definitely at that, because there's a lot of dentists, and we can't be villainizing dentists because they don't take the Badger care, because that could be a problem, because a lot of them guys that don't do that, they do stuff on the side that they don't even tell you about. There's a lot of dentists that I know in my area that work with people, maybe take a $5 payment here and there, and they'll help people, but they're not going to be locked into the Badger care system because it is so poorly reimbursed. And who can blame them?
Are you hearing from caregivers? AARP estimates that 578,000 Wisconsin residents are caregivers for family members or neighbors.
Yes.
Would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when a loved one is hospitalized? Is this issue been on your screen at all?
It hasn't. It sounds like it would make sense. We had several bills that came through on like Alzheimer's credits and caregivers, and being my mother passed away in 2014, and she had dementia, and it touches all of our lives, and it's one of these things that I think if we can support the caregivers, absolutely, because otherwise it's going to fall upon the taxpayers, caregivers, taxpayers, one or the other.
Your caucus came forward with a plan to fund highways, bridges, construction, maintenance in the future. Didn't get enacted. There's still gridlock.
Yeah.
Well, how would you like to see this issue resolved? How do we pay for our highway future?
Well, that is another one I think very ripe for a study committee to figure out what our needs are for the future and what our costs are. I saw that the governor came out with a plan the other day that said he's going to give a 50% increase to the counties in their road aids. Ever since I've been in the legislature for the past 6 years, they've been asking for increased money, including towns and villages and what have you. And they need it because the cost of what they do for a road now is not what it cost 6 years ago. And you can't just keep giving them the same amount and saying, okay, just get it done. It is something that it has to be adjusted for inflation, has to be adjusted for increased costs, petroleum costs, whatever. And I think we'll figure that out. As you know, I drive a hybrid, and I authored several bills, and they got enacted, but enacted in a different way that I didn't care for. I was willing to pay a little bit more for my registration costs for my hybrid because I figured I wasn't paying my fair share. Well, it got changed to a plug-in hybrid. It was Michigan's way, and then electric cars got $100. And I talked to people that own Teslas, and I asked them, hey, listen, would you be willing to pay $200 more per year for your registration? Because you're paying zero in gas tax revenue to the state. And the two of them that I talked to that had Tesla said, yeah, absolutely, I want good roads to drive on too. And we only raised the electric car thing $100. So I'll be looking at what I can do to try to get that changed again, or maybe put it into the next budget again, because I really believe that they want to have good roads. There's an increase. In fact, from what I originally drafted 4 years ago, it's almost double the amount of electric cars that are on the road now than what they anticipated would be on the road at this point. So it's almost double. Can you imagine what it will be if they, in 4 years from now? There's going to be a lot more. And by the way, they're great fun cars to drive. They have plug-ins all over. In fact, Manitowoc has one even at our visitor center in Manitowoc. You can go and plug in your electric car and recharge for free.
Would you consider raising the gas tax, or is that an outmoded way of paying for highways? And where are you on tolling when that comes up?
Well, I think in the gas tax, if you're looking at increasing revenues, gas tax is probably the most equal way of doing it, because we have a lot of visitors. We have billions of dollars in tourism in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, go on I-43 on Sunday morning going up to the Packer game, you'll see a lot of people, and there are a lot of gas stations, very busy. I think that would be probably the most equitable way. I'm not looking at raising registration, because I think that's only taking from the Wisconsin people their hard-earned money. I think, and also you raise registration on the little old lady that only drives 5,000 miles a year. She's paying a lot more for her roads and I think it should be on a per use basis. And I think gas tax is probably the equal way. I'd look at it. I'm not saying, I want to raise it as any set amount. And toll roads, I think that's a thing of the future that we are going to be studying. And I think we will find something in toll roads. It won't be anything like what you see in other states. It's going to be more of an open toll road concept. And we'll probably have to look, and I think there's a lot of states that do a lot of different things, but Wisconsin, we can do things better. And it's because we can work together. And, like over 90% of the bills that we passed in the Assembly were bipartisan. And we do work together, contrary to what public opinion is.
Local governments have been living with levy limits to control property taxes for 13, 14 years. Right. Should those limits be continued, dialed back, loosened, or done away with? Well,
that one, being a local, I was a local government official before I got elected here. I was on the City Council of Manitowoc for 4 years, and I was also on the County Board for 7 years, and was County Board Chairman for the last 2 years before I came here. It is one of them things that every time the locals want me to reduce the levy, we're concerned about how much that they will raise on the local taxpayers, because some will be fine, some will be very responsible, very respectful, and I think in my area, I think that's what would happen if the levy limits were loosened. Some of them would be they would be hard on the taxpayer, and I think there's got to be somewhere in the middle ground where not loosening completely and not necessarily keeping it at the same, but there could be somewhere in between where we could come together and I think make sure that the taxpayer is still protected.
The tax breaks, tax benefits extended to Foxconn are one reason that Kimberly Clark wants the same type of tax breaks. It's the larger question: when should state government hand out these tax breaks to private companies?
Well, in a perfect world, Steve, never. But we aren't living in that perfect world. We're in a very competitive world for business. Philosophically, it's not a good idea to necessarily incentivize the different companies. But the reality is, if we don't do it, Illinois, Missouri, pick your state, whatever, they will do something, and they will drag our businesses away. So we have to make sure that we incentivize and responsibly, yet we also got to make sure that they understand that they're getting a good work ethic person here. I mean, people in Wisconsin work hard. If you talk to anybody that works down south, they will look for somebody that works up north because they have a work ethic in them unlike any other. And I think we need to make sure that companies understand it's like, okay, you can go somewhere else, but you are not going to get the same product. You are not going to get the same quality. Wisconsin workers are the best.
The current budget that you voted for dramatically increased, well, $600 million more for K-12 school aids. When local education leaders say, hey, thank you, but we need another big bump next 2 years, your answer, do we?
I've always been a strong proponent of public education. I think because first of all, we're constitutionally protected that we must provide an education for everyone. Doesn't matter. So I've always, and I go to my meeting with my superintendents every single month, and we talk about different issues. And I think they're one of the ones that I was talking about that are telling you that are been responsible. They've had some of them where they could have raised their levy even higher, and they haven't. And so I think what their needs are the same as too. And they also, I think Manitowoc is doing very well in dealing with declining enrollment right now because they have a declining enrollment, and they're shifting around some of their schools and whatever in Manitowoc. They have a good plan, and I think they're going to also go from a 3-year high school to a 4-year high school, and I think that's great. I went to a 3-year high school, Lincoln High School, but now they're going to make it a 4-year, and I think that's one way of dealing with some of your declining enrollments. And I think that they are actually very proactive, and even some of the other superintendents, even outside of Manitowoc and Two Rivers and Chilton, they've done great jobs. And it's harder for a smaller community like a Chilton that basically houses all of their kids in one school, maybe split off in the middle, but they house all of their kids. You can't just close down a school when you have a declining enrollment. So it's even harder for them. So we have to listen to what their needs are. And I know, being in business, that the cost of doing business now is not the same as what it was 3 or 4 years ago. You know, teachers need to be paid, heat bills go up, electricity bills, everything like that costs more, so they're going to need more, and we have to look at that.
The voucher program has been expanded significantly over the last few years. Mm-hmm. Should it be expanded further by allowing even more higher income families to participate, or are you happy where it is now?
I think it's good where it's at right now. I think it's one of these programs I think that we can live with, but we have to be careful about drastically expanding it because it could hurt in other areas.
The bills in the Capitol to legalize recreational marijuana, medical marijuana, your positions?
Recreational, I don't know that I would support that. Medical, it's interesting because in 2013, I believe it was my first year in the Assembly. There was a medical marijuana bill that was brought forth by one of the Democrats. I had people contact my office. I actually wrote to then Chair Peterson of the Eric Peterson. He used to be the physician that was up in northwest corner.
Yes.
I wrote him and said we should have a hearing on this because I think we need to have this conversation. Now, that was 5 years ago. So I think we need to have the conversation on medical marijuana. I'm not saying that, hey, I'm all for it and I'm all against it. And again, this is one of them things where you can do it and you can do it differently than other states. In California, for an example, I have a brother that lives in California, and he's basically telling me if you want medical marijuana, you could go up to this kiosk and you could get a medical marijuana card, basically just go up there and say, I feel anxious every now and then. Well, I think if we're going to do medical marijuana, it should be for a very specific disease, should be very specific, written by a doctor, and not necessarily just filled by just a dispensary down the street. I think there is a better way to do it, and I think we can find that better way if we're going to go ahead on it.
But you're not ready to support recreational at this point?
No, I am not recreational at this point. When I've talked to law enforcement, it's very hard for them to, when you have somebody driving under the influence of, say, alcohol, you can blow into a breathalyzer, they can do a blood test. It's very easy for them. It's a lot harder for them to see somebody that's driving under influence of drugs versus alcohol. And so until that's a little bit more materialized, I think we could have a problem with that.
Differences between you and your Democratic opponent on November 6th?
Well, basically, I'm experienced. I've been here. I've served in local government. I've served at the county level government. I think a lot of people really like that experience, and I think they trust me. I have a big heart, and I'm not just down here for a certain agenda. I'm down here to make a better Wisconsin.
Thank you. Republican Representative Paul Tittle of Manitowoc, seeking re-election in the 25th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Paul, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.